At 19, she was forced to marry a millionaire farmer, but her husband's wedding gift stunned all. At just 19, Lena felt as though life had already given her more than enough challenges. She was born in a small village, surrounded by fields of golden wheat that swayed in the breeze and hills that seemed to go on forever. Despite the beauty of the landscape, her family had always struggled to make ends meet. Her father had passed away when she was only 12, leaving her mother to take care of everything. The farm they owned had become a burden rather than a blessing, with debts piling up every season. Her mother, though strong and resilient, could only do so much. Lena had taken on the responsibility of helping as best she could, but it never seemed to be enough. It was during one of the worst harvests that everything changed. The crops had failed again, and Lena had no idea how they would survive the coming winter. Her mother was doing her best to keep a brave face, but the worry was visible in the lines on her forehead. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table with only a handful of bread and cheese to share, a visitor arrived. He was a tall man with dark hair and sharp features, wearing a long coat that seemed out of place in the modest home. His presence felt both commanding and out of place, as though he wasn't just a man who had walked in from the village. He introduced himself as Victor Stone, a name that Lena had heard only in whispers. He was a millionaire farmer, someone who had transformed barren land into thriving crops in a world where most others struggled. It was said he was as powerful as he was wealthy, and some even claimed he had more influence than most world leaders. Lena's mother was wary of him at first, unsure why someone like him would be interested in their small farm. But Victor's offer was simple and direct. He told them that he could save the farm, pay off their debts, and ensure they never had to worry about food again. The only thing he asked for in return was Lena's hand in marriage. He claimed that his business dealings required him to marry, but he had no interest in love or companionship, only in a partnership that would benefit both sides. Lena was stunned. The idea of being married to a man so much older and wealthy seemed absurd to her. She had dreams of her own, of escaping the small town, of living a life beyond the fields and the constant worry of survival. Yet there was a harsh reality she couldn't ignore. Without Victor's help, the farm would be lost, and her mother's health, already fragile, would likely worsen under the stress. The choice was difficult but clear. If she refused, they would lose everything. Her mother, exhausted by years of struggle, urged her to accept. "This is a chance, Lena. Don't let pride stand in the way of our survival," she said softly. Her words were like a weight on Lena's chest, each syllable a reminder of the burden she carried. She could see the desperation in her mother's eyes, and it made the decision harder to bear. Victor made it clear that the marriage would not be traditional. He would not demand love or affection, just an agreement between them to ensure his business interests were secured. Lena would live in his mansion, far from the life she had known, and he would take care of everything. In exchange, she would be the face of his empire, a silent partner in a world that was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Despite her reservations, Lena agreed. The thought of saving her family and finally escaping the weight of poverty was too great a temptation. The wedding was arranged quickly, and within a week, she was standing in a grand hall, dressed in a gown of pure white, staring at a man who felt like a stranger. Victor's mansion was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were adorned with paintings that looked centuries old, and the floors gleamed as if they had been polished just hours before. The wedding ceremony was brief, with only a few of Victor's business associates in attendance. It was more of a transaction than a celebration. She stood at the altar, her hands trembling, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. When the ceremony was over, the reality of her new life began to sink in. The mansion felt cold and sterile, and the silence was deafening. The staff, polite but distant, guided her to her new room, a suite that was more like a prison than a sanctuary. Her new life was not one of luxury, but of isolation. Victor, however, was not the cruel man she had feared. He was distant, but not unkind. He seemed to view the marriage as a business arrangement, and his attention was always focused on his work. Lena had no idea what her role was supposed to be, beyond being his wife in name. It was clear that Victor didn't care for her company, and she didn't care for his. They lived separate lives under the same roof, never speaking unless necessary. It was the wedding night that things began to take a strange turn. As they sat together in the parlor, Victor handed her a small box. "This is your gift," he said, his voice flat. "I trust it will be of interest to you." Lena stared at the box, puzzled. It was small, wrapped in elegant silver paper with a ribbon that shimmered under the light. She untied the ribbon slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside was a sleek metallic object. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The object seemed to hum faintly, as if it were alive. Victor leaned forward, his eyes dark with intent. "This is more than just a gift, Lena. It's a key to unlocking something far greater than you can imagine." He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "You are about to embark on a journey that will change everything." Lena looked at him, confusion and fear in her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He gave a small, knowing smile. "You will understand soon enough, but for now, rest. You have much to learn." That night, as Lena lay in the large, cold bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had been thrust into this new life so quickly, and now she was faced with something she couldn't begin to comprehend. The object in the box seemed to pulse with energy, its presence a reminder that this marriage was not what it appeared to be. Lena didn't sleep much that night. Her mind raced with thoughts of her family, of the farm, of the strange gift Victor had given her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of something that would either free her or trap her forever. As the days passed, she began to see the mansion differently. It was no longer just a place of luxury, but a fortress of secrets. And the more she observed Victor, the more she realized that he was not the man he pretended to be. His intentions were unclear, and the gift he had given her was just the beginning of something much larger. Lena knew that her life had been changed in ways she couldn't yet understand, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed Lena's wedding were a blur. At first, she found herself lost in a world so different from the one she had known. The mansion was vast, with corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, rooms filled with fine furniture and art that felt out of place in a house that was supposed to be a home. The staff, always polite, never spoke to her unless spoken to. It felt like she was invisible, and yet everything she did was watched closely. Victor remained distant, consumed by his work, and the few times they did speak, it was about business. She learned quickly that he was a man of routine, up at dawn, working in his study until late at night, rarely taking time for anything that wasn't related to his business empire. To her surprise, there were no romantic gestures, no moments of affection, just cold professionalism. It was clear that, to him, this marriage was purely transactional. As the days passed, Lena couldn't ignore the object Victor had given her on their wedding night. The sleek metallic item sat on the table beside her bed, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. No buttons, no screen, just a series of small, intricate designs etched into the surface. It seemed harmless enough, but something about it unsettled her. One evening, as the mansion fell into silence after dinner, Lena decided to examine the gift more closely. She ran her fingers over the strange markings, tracing their patterns. There was no obvious way to open it, no clear direction on how it worked. But as she focused on it, she noticed a faint hum, almost imperceptible at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She pulled her hand away quickly, heart racing. What was this thing? It felt alive somehow. She stared at it for a long while, then took a deep breath and made up her mind. She had to find out what it was and why Victor had given it to her. The next morning, Lena decided to approach Victor. She hadn't spoken to him much since the wedding, but this was different. She needed answers. She found him in his study, sitting at his desk, scribbling notes on a piece of paper. He didn't look up as she entered, but the door creaked softly behind her, making him glance up briefly. "Lena," he said, his voice flat as always. "What is it?" Lena hesitated for a moment, unsure how to phrase her question. "The gift you gave me," she began. I don't understand it. What is it?" Victor's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "It's something for your protection," he said after a long pause, his voice calm. "You'll come to understand its purpose soon enough." Lena wasn't satisfied with his answer, but she didn't press further. Something in his tone told her it wasn't a conversation he was willing to have right now. She turned and left the study, the mysterious object still weighing heavily on her mind. As the days passed, Lena tried to occupy herself with the little things in the mansion. She spent time exploring the vast grounds outside, admiring the well-kept gardens and the orchard that stretched into the distance. There were staff members who maintained the place, but they kept their distance from her. She began to feel like a ghost in her own home, more like an ornament than a wife. One afternoon, as Lena wandered through the expansive library, she found herself alone in the room. The shelves were lined with books that seemed to stretch for miles. Most of the books were about agriculture, technology, and economics, fields that were far removed from her interests. But one book caught her eye. It was a thick, leather-bound volume that looked old, almost ancient. Curious, Lena pulled it from the shelf and began flipping through the pages. The book was filled with complex diagrams and strange symbols, none of which made sense to her. But as she reached the last few pages, one word stood out: Elysium. It was written in bold letters, as if it was meant to grab her attention. The pages that followed described a place, a hidden society, where the brightest minds and the most powerful individuals gathered to shape the future of humanity. The technology described was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Nanosuits that could enhance a person's abilities to superhuman levels, machines that could bend the laws of physics, and a secretive group that controlled it all. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly closed the book and shoved it back onto the shelf, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. Was this what Victor was involved in? Was this the secret he was keeping from her? She spent the next few days and a days trying to piece together the fragments of information she had gathered. Her curiosity had been piqued, but she didn't know where to start. The mansion felt like a prison, each room a new mystery, each hallway a dead end. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she was missing, something important. Victor continued his cold, distant behavior, retreating further into his work. Every time she tried to confront him, he would brush her off with vague answers. He was a man of few words, and his silence made Lena feel more isolated than ever. It was during one of these quiet evenings, when Victor had retreated to his study once more, that Lena decided to take matters into her own hands. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to wait any longer. The object Victor had given her was still sitting on her bedside table, its sleek surface gleaming in the dim light of the room. Lena stood over it, her fingers trembling as she reached for it once again. She had no idea what it would do, but she couldn't let fear stop her anymore. She lifted the object and examined it closely, this time noticing a small button hidden along one of its edges. Her heart pounded as she pressed it. There was a moment of silence, followed by a low hum. The object began to change, its surface shifting and moving as if it were coming to life. Suddenly, the object unfolded, revealing a small, holographic screen. The words that appeared on the screen were clear and precise. Activation complete. Begin transformation sequence. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The screen flickered and a new message appeared. Prepare yourself, Lena. The future of humanity depends on you. Before she could react, the object pulsed brightly and a wave of energy shot through her body. Her skin tingled, and for a moment, everything seemed to shift out of focus. It was as if her body was being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. The sensation was overwhelming, and she struggled to remain standing, her knees buckling beneath her. Just as suddenly as it began, the energy stopped. Lena collapsed onto the bed, gasping for breath. Her body felt different, lighter, stronger, faster. Her mind was clearer than it had ever been, and she could feel a new kind of power coursing through her veins. She looked down at her hands, seeing them in a new light. The world around her seemed more vivid, more alive. Every sound, every smell, every sensation was amplified. She stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the transformation settle in. What had just happened? Was this the gift Victor had promised her? Lena stumbled to the mirror, her reflection staring back at her in disbelief. She looked the same, but she felt different, more than she had ever been. The transformation had changed her on a fundamental level, but what did it mean? What was the purpose of it all? As she stood there, still trying to grasp the enormity of what had just occurred, she knew one thing for sure. Her life had just become much more complicated. And whatever Victor's plans were, they involved her in ways she couldn't yet understand. The future was now in her hands, and Lena had no choice but to find out what it all meant. Lena stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection, her mind reeling from the overwhelming transformation she had just experienced. The world around her felt different, clearer, more intense, as if she were seeing everything for the first time. Her senses had sharpened to an almost terrifying degree. She could hear the soft hum of the mansion's heating system, the faint rustle of leaves outside, even the soft ticking of a clock in the hallway. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. She touched her face, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight pulse beneath her fingertips. Her heart raced in confusion and wonder. What had happened to her? What was the purpose of the object Victor had given her? And why had it changed her so drastically? Lena's mind was spinning, and she stumbled back onto the bed, taking deep, steadying breaths. She hadn't been prepared for this. She had expected something, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Her body felt stronger, as if she could accomplish anything, yet the unease inside her remained. The object had unlocked something inside her, something powerful, but something she wasn't sure she could control. The night passed in a blur. Lena tossed and turned in the unfamiliar bed, her thoughts racing. She needed answers, but where could she find them? Every time she tried to speak with Victor, he would deflect her questions, offering vague responses that didn't make sense. He had told her it was for her protection, but that explanation was no longer enough. There had to be more to this than Victor had let on. The next morning, Lena rose early, determined to confront him again. She needed to understand what had happened to her and why. She couldn't keep living in the dark, surrounded by questions that had no answers. Victor was in his study, as usual. He barely looked up as she entered, his eyes fixed on a stack of papers in front of him. For a moment, Lena felt as if she were invisible, but she cleared her throat and stepped forward. "Victor," she said, her voice firm, "we need to talk." He glanced at her, his face expressionless. "About what?" She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "The gift you gave me. I don't understand what's happening. You've changed my life in a way I didn't expect, and I need you to explain it to me." Victor didn't respond immediately. He leaned back in his chair, studying her as if assessing her. Lena felt his gaze linger, his eyes dark and unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "You've begun to feel it, haven't you? The change." Lena nodded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. "Yes, everything's different. I don't know what's happening, and I don't know what you expect from me." Victor sighed and stood up slowly, walking toward the large window that overlooked the estate. He stood there for a long moment, his back to her, before speaking again. "It's not something I expected either," he said quietly, "but it's something that needed to happen. You've been chosen for something bigger than either of us." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Chosen? For what?" Victor turned to face her, his expression hardening. "You are part of something much greater than just this estate, Lena. This isn't just about me or you. This is about humanity's future. The technology you've unlocked is only the beginning. What you've become is the next step in our evolution." Lena's mind raced. "What do you mean? What does that even mean?" Victor walked over to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a folder filled with documents. He handed it to her, and Lena took it reluctantly. As she flipped through the pages, she found diagrams, charts, and notes that she couldn't understand. But one word stood out: the awakening. She looked up at Victor, her confusion deepening. "What is this? What is the awakening?" Victor took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "The awakening is a group, a movement. It's made up of people who have been selected for their potential to change the world. We have developed technology, like the device I gave you, that allows us to enhance the human body and mind. The future of humanity depends on individuals like you, people who can lead the charge in this new era." Lena's head spun as she tried to process what he was saying. "So you're telling me that I've been enhanced? To do what exactly?" Victor's gaze softened slightly, but his tone remained serious. "To help lead us into the future. Humanity is at a crossroads. We are on the brink of a technological revolution, but we need the right people to guide us. People who are stronger, smarter, and more capable than the average person. People like you." Lena felt a chill run through her. This was more than just a marriage. It wasn't about her family's survival or even her own life. It was about something much bigger. She had been chosen, but for what purpose? "Why me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Victor leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because you have potential. You've always had it. You just didn't know it yet. But now, with the enhancements I've given you, you have the power to shape the future. Your role in this is critical, Lena. You need to embrace this. You need to understand that your life is no longer just your own." Lena recoiled slightly, her heart pounding in her chest. "You're asking me to give up everything. My life, my choices, my freedom, all for this movement. I don't even know what it is." Victor stood up and walked to the window again, his back to her. "I'm not asking you to give up anything, Lena. I'm asking you to step into a new world, one where you can make a real difference. The world needs leaders like you. It needs people who are more than just human. And you, Lena, are that person. Lena's mind was racing, her emotions a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and anger. She had never signed up for this. She had never asked for any of this, but now here she was, trapped in a marriage that wasn't real, in a life that wasn't her own. And the worst part was that she couldn't escape. Not yet. As she stood there, her mind spinning with questions, she knew she had a choice to make. She could accept Victor's vision and embrace her new reality, or she could fight back. But the stakes were higher than she could ever have imagined. "You've already begun the transformation, Lena," Victor said, his voice calm but insistent. "It's too late to turn back now." Lena clenched her fists, a surge of anger rising within her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she was sure of one thing. She wasn't going to let Victor control her life. Not without a fight. With a final, determined glance at him, she turned and walked out of the study, her mind made up. The future was in her hands now. And whatever it was, she would not face it alone. Lena walked away from Victor's study, her mind racing. She had learned so much in such a short time, but nothing had really answered the questions that plagued her. What was the awakening? What did they want from her? And what kind of future was she being asked to accept? The halls of the mansion felt colder now, as if the walls themselves were closing in around her. Each step echoed in the silence, a reminder that, for all the grandeur of this place, she was completely alone. Victor's words still hung in the air, his insistence that she had been chosen for something greater. But she wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. Lena knew she needed to find answers, but the mansion offered no comfort, no safe place to think. She had no choice but to leave and find out more on her own. The thought of stepping outside the walls of Victor's domain both terrified and excited her. The world beyond the mansion felt like a mystery, an unknown that she had never really considered before. Her life had always been defined by the small town she came from, the fields, the farm, the daily struggles. But now everything had changed. She had changed. Her footsteps carried her toward the large doors that led to the garden, the place she had spent some time exploring before. The fresh air outside seemed inviting, a small sanctuary in a world that was rapidly becoming alien to her. She stepped into the garden, taking a deep breath as she tried to calm the storm of emotions inside her. She walked among the flowers and trees, the peacefulness of the space doing little to ease her growing unease. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground. Lena found herself at the edge of the garden, near a small stone bench under an old oak tree. She sat down, wrapping her arms around herself, feeling the weight of her situation pressed down on her. It wasn't long before a voice broke the silence. "You're out here all alone, aren't you?" Lena looked up, startled to see a woman standing nearby. She was tall and striking, with short black hair and sharp features that looked familiar, though Lena couldn't quite place where she had seen her before. "I'm sorry," the woman said, walking closer. "I didn't mean to startle you. I was just wondering if you needed someone to talk to." Lena blinked, unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to people approaching her like this, especially not in Victor's mansion, where the staff and visitors usually kept to themselves. "I don't know who you are," Lena replied cautiously, her voice tight with suspicion. The woman smiled softly, as if she understood Lena's hesitation. "I'm Alara," she said, sitting on the bench beside Lena. "I've been working for Victor for a long time, but I've been kept in the shadows. I know more about what's happening here than you might think." Lena turned her head to look at Alara, studying her face. There was something about her calm demeanor, her quiet confidence, that made Lena feel a strange sense of familiarity, as if Alara was someone she could trust. "Why are you telling me this?" Lena asked, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. "What do you want from me?" Alara didn't answer immediately. She seemed to choose her words carefully, as though weighing the importance of every sentence. "I'm not here to ask anything of you," she said at last. "But I think you deserve to know the truth, Lena, about Victor, about the awakening. About what's really going on." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What do you know?" Alara's eyes darkened, and she looked over her shoulder as if checking to make sure they were alone. "I've been part of the awakening for a long time," she said softly. "I know what Victor's plans are, and I know why you were chosen, but what he's not telling you is that you're not the first." Lena's mind raced. "Not the first? What do you mean?" "There were others before you," Alara explained. "People who were enhanced like you, given the same kind of power you've just unlocked, but not all of them made it. Some of them rebelled and they paid the price. The technology, this nanosuit, it's not just a tool. It's a weapon. Lena felt a chill run through her. A weapon? Yes, Alara said, nodding. Victor and his people are trying to create an army of enhanced individuals. They believe that humanity needs to evolve quickly, that the only way to survive the coming challenges is to push human potential to its limits. But they're not thinking about the cost, the toll it takes on the people they choose to enhance. They believe it's necessary, but they're blind to the consequences. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had always felt something was off, something about Victor's intentions that didn't sit right with her. But hearing Alara's words made everything feel even more dangerous. The power she had gained, the strength she now felt coursing through her, was it really worth the price? So what happens to people like me? Lena asked, her voice trembling. Alara looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and sadness. That depends on you. Some people like you might be able to use the power for good. Others, they lose themselves in it. It consumes them and they become nothing more than tools in a greater plan. Victor has his own vision for the future, but it's not the future I want. And it's not the one I think you should want either. Lena felt a wave of confusion. She didn't know what to believe. She had been brought into this world by Victor, married to him, given power she didn't understand. But now someone was telling her the truth, or at least part of it. The problem was she didn't know who to trust. Victor's intentions had seemed clear from the start, but Alara's warning raised more questions than answers. Why are you telling me this? Lena asked again, her voice barely a whisper. Alara turned to her, her eyes filled with an earnest determination. Because I want to help you. I can't stand by and watch you become another pawn in Victor's game. You have the power to change things, Lena, to make your own choices. But first, you need to see what's really going on. You need to understand the full picture. Lena stared at her, trying to process everything. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to fall into place, but there were still too many unknowns. She was being pulled in two different directions, and both paths seemed fraught with danger. Alara, Lena said, her voice trembling, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are, Alara replied softly. You've already begun the transformation. The hardest part is over. Now you just have to decide who you want to be. You don't have to let Victor control you. You don't have to be a part of the awakening if you don't want to. Lena closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She had so many choices to make, so many roads to walk down, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't stay in the dark any longer. Whatever she chose, it would define her future. I need time to think, Lena said quietly. Alara nodded. Take all the time you need, but remember you don't have to do this alone. As Lena sat there, the weight of her choices pressing on her, she realized that nothing about her life would ever be simple again. The power she had gained was both a gift and a curse, and she didn't know where it would lead her. But she knew one thing, her path forward would be shaped by the choices she made now. The days that followed were a blur for Lena. The weight of her new reality pressed down on her, and every decision she made felt like it carried the potential to change everything. She had spent countless hours pacing the halls of the mansion, trying to process the information Alara had shared with her. What was the right thing to do? What was the future she wanted to create? Lena knew she had to make a choice, but the decision wasn't as simple as choosing sides. It wasn't about just accepting Victor's vision for the future or rejecting it. It was about something much deeper, about who she was, who she wanted to be, and what kind of world she was willing to fight for. Victor had offered her power, but power came with its own price. The transformation she had gone through, the enhancements that had unlocked her potential, had given her a strength she had never known before. But it also brought a sense of responsibility. She could feel the weight of it in her every step, in every breath she took. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that what Victor and the Awakening wanted was not just about evolving humanity. It was about control. The power they sought to harness wasn't meant to liberate people. It was meant to dominate them. And yet, Alara had shown her a different way, a way out. She had shown Lena that there was another path, one where she could be in control of her own destiny, where she could use the power she had gained for something good. But Alara's warning still echoed in Lena's mind. Some people lost themselves in the power. Some people became nothing more than tools. Lena knew that she was at a crossroads. She couldn't go back to the life she had before. The person she had been before the transformation was gone. But what would she become now? It wasn't long before Lena decided that she couldn't wait any longer. She needed to confront Victor. She needed to hear it from him, what he truly wanted and what he was willing to do to get it. So one afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Lena walked to Victor's study. She didn't knock. She just opened the door and stepped inside. Victor was sitting at his desk, scribbling on a piece of paper just as he always did. But when he saw her, he set the pen down and looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "I need to talk to you," Lena said, her voice steady, but her heart was racing. Victor didn't say anything for a moment, just watched her with a calm intensity. Then he nodded, motioning for her to sit. Lena didn't sit. She stood, her hands clenched by her sides. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You've given me power, but I don't know what you expect me to do with it." Victor leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him. "I expect you to do what's best for humanity," he said, his voice cold. "I've given you the tools to shape the future. You're a part of something much bigger than yourself, Lena. I've always known that you were special." Lena's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. "I don't want to be a part of your plan," she said, her voice unwavering. "I don't want to be just another piece in your game." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand," he said, his tone low and dangerous. "This isn't a game. This is the future of humanity. You've been given the power to lead, to shape what comes next. You have the ability to change the world, Lena. And you're choosing to walk away from it." Lena's heart was pounding, but she refused to back down. "I'm not walking away from anything," she said, her voice strong. "I'm choosing to make my own path. I'm not going to be controlled by you or anyone else. I don't care what you think is best for humanity. I'm not going to be your weapon." Victor stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. For the first time since Lena had met him, she saw a flicker of anger in his eyes. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he demanded. "You think you can just reject everything I've given you?" Lena didn't flinch. "I think I can do whatever I want," she said, her voice steady. "And what I want is to use my power for something that matters. I'm not going to let you manipulate me into becoming something I'm not." Victor's face darkened, but he didn't speak for a moment. The tension between them was thick, like a storm waiting to break. Then finally he spoke, his voice colder than before. "Do you really think you can take control of this, Lena?" he asked. "You think you can just walk away from everything I've built, everything I've planned? You think you're ready for that?" Lena took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "I don't need you to build my future," she said. "I'm going to build it myself. And I'm not going to do it in your shadow." Victor's gaze was like ice, but Lena didn't look away. She could feel the power surging inside her, and it was like a fire that had been waiting to be released. She had felt the weight of the transformation, but now, for the first time, she felt in control of it. It was Victor's power that she needed. It was her own. Victor stared at her for a long time, his jaw clenched, but then he finally spoke again, his voice tight. "You'll regret this, Lena," he said, his words like a warning. "You have no idea what you're up against." Lena's eyes were fierce, unyielding. "I'm not afraid of you, Victor, and I'm not afraid of the future. I'll create my own destiny. You won't control me." Without another word, she turned and walked out of his study, her heart pounding but her steps confident and sure. As Lena walked through the mansion, her mind was clearer than it had ever been. She didn't need Victor. She didn't need anyone. She had the power to shape the world in her own image. But that power wasn't just about strength or control. It was about choice. It was about forging a future that was hers, not dictated by anyone else. The world outside the mansion felt different now. It felt more alive, more full of possibility. Lena knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, people who believed in the same things she did, who wanted a world where power wasn't just about domination, but about empowerment. And that was the world she would build. As Lena stepped outside, the air was cool against her skin, and she took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time she felt ready for it. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Lena was no longer afraid. She would face whatever came her way with the strength she had gained, the wisdom she had earned, and the unwavering belief that the future was hers to create. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Lena smiled, knowing that she was ready to lead the charge into a new world, one where she would be the one in control.